So the exercise that all beginners need to try is to paint the same painting twice, once in black and white and then again in color. This is gonna benefit you in 5 different ways I'm gonna go over in this video. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to go over an alteration to this exercise that makes it a little more difficult, but can also help you so much. So if you wanna try this exercise yourself, I'm going to put the photo references up here on the screen for you to take a screenshot. But if you want the full tutorials of these, me walking you through it step by step, those can be found on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description below. So the first benefit to this exercise is that it's gonna show you that you most likely have a value problem, not a color problem. Meaning when you're mixing color, you're probably thinking too much about the actual color, the blue, the red, the yellow, the green, and not enough about the value of the color, how dark or light it is. So here's an example from a student who's in the apprentice level tier on my Patreon, and they submitted this painting for critique. And one of the main critiques I have with it is the value. For the color inside the pineapple, it's the right color. Like all the colors in this are right. It's just they didn't dial in the values correctly. They needed to make the value of the inside part of this pineapple that's in shadow a little bit darker. They also can make the outside of the pineapple a little bit darker. And making those two areas darker will make the part that's lit up seem that much brighter. They also wouldn't have had to made this part of the pineapple that isn't light as bright as they did. I can tell that they had to push the light side of this pineapple here more than they should have to make it look bright because it was next to a shadow that wasn't that dark. You can actually see here in my painting that I achieved this light effect while using a value that was actually darker in the light section than theirs. But that light effect is working because I surrounded that light with the right darks. So when you're doing a painting just using black and white, it is taking color out of the equation. So you only have values to communicate the subject. Okay, the second benefit of this exercise is that it's going to help you see the true value of a color. A perfect example here is the apple. More specifically, the part of the apple that's in light. A lot of people will see this bright red and think, oh, like that's really bright. Don't get color saturation confused with value. Just because it's a very vibrant or very saturated color doesn't mean that it's going to be a very bright color. You can see when I take the color out of the photo that this red part of the apple in light really isn't that bright. Another thing to look at in this apple is that there are different colors in this apple. There's a little bit of green in it, but in black and white, you can't make out where that green is. That means that when you paint that green in there, you need to make it the same value as the red. I always see beginners stumble with this, like they'll be painting an apple and they'll have different colors in the apple. And when they shift colors, they shift values and you need to keep it the same value. So if you're painting an apple and there's different colors on the apple, while you're painting, make sure to take photo of your painting on your phone and put it in black and white and make sure that even though you're changing colors, you're not changing values. Another good example to look at is the light side of this egg and how dark it actually is. A lot of people would look at the colored version of this photo and look at the light side of the egg and be like, oh, like it's in light, it's an egg, it's gonna be bright. But it really isn't. And I was actually pretty surprised when I saw this, and doing the black and white painting really helped show me how dark in value that light side of the egg really is. All right, all this talk of color and value, if you struggle with mixing colors, if you don't know what you're doing, you get lost, you don't know what colors to use and how to get to other colors, I actually offer the color mixing video from my Foundations of Oil Painting course for free. If you want to check that out, there's a link to it in the description of this video. All right, the third benefit is that it's going to help you see value relationships. A lot of times the only way to find the true value of a color is to compare it to the values that are around it. A good thing to do at the beginning of the painting is to find your darkest dark and or your lightest light. That way you have both ends of the value scale, and you know that any values you find in the painting will have to fall between those two values. So as I go through the painting, I'm always comparing values and then ranking them on where they fall on the value scale. You really want to pay very close attention to these value relationships because the more subtle you can get with the value relationships, the better your painting's going to be. Can you look at two values, one that's just slightly darker than another, and be able to identify that and then have that in your painting? I feel like a lot of beginners are good at identifying the big difference in value relationships, you know, something that's pretty dark and something that's pretty light, but it's when you get down to the very small, subtle changes that you can really take your paintings to the next level. All right, on to benefit number 4, which is it's going to help you see where you can lose edges. Edges are so important. I feel like it's the last thing that people kind of get a handle on when it comes to painting, which is why I feel the telltale sign of an advanced painter is how they handle edges. A lot of beginners are afraid to lose edges. They feel like they have to identify every single edge they see in the painting. But for example, with this black and white painting, since there is no color, areas that have the same value, even though they're different colors, you're going to lose the edge between those two subjects. An example here is the light side of the egg. Since the light side of this egg is very, very close in value to the table behind it, you kind of lose that edge. And I made sure that when I was painting it in black and white, that I did lose that edge, that it was the same value as the table behind it. And then when I went to the colored version of it, I made sure when I was finding the color that it was the right value. And I knew it was the right value because when I squinted my eyes, I lost the edge of that egg. See, squinting your eyes not only gets rid of detail, it kind of gets rid of color a little bit. And when I get rid of color a little bit, I can see the edge of that egg just kind of like fade away into the table. And that's when I knew, oh, okay, I got the right value. Another thing you can do when you're painting the colored version is that you can take a photo with your phone, put it in black and white, and see if you lose that edge when it's in black and white. Another good example of edges in this is the shadowed side of the apple. In the black and white version, you can see it's very hard, pretty much impossible to see the edge of the apple in shadow. Whereas in the color version, you can a little bit more because there's a color change. And actually, when I painted the color version, I started by pulling in some of that dark background actually into the apple. That way I could kind of pull the red out from that dark and just have a seamless transition. And also make sure that when I squinted my eyes that the value was very close to the value of the dark background. All right, number 5 is the inverse of number 4, which is it's going to help you see hard, crisp edges. You know, areas like the edge of this apple and the edge of this egg have very hard, crisp, clear edges. And they have those because there is a big contrast in value. So as I'm painting these, if I am not getting a hard, crisp edge where I'm seeing it, it's an indicator to me that I need to check my values. Maybe my dark isn't dark enough. Maybe my light isn't light enough, or maybe both. When you're painting, you rarely want to be drawing lines while you're painting. You want to create hard lines by putting the correct value shapes next to each other. All right, now, are you ready for the little bonus alteration you can make to this exercise to make it a little bit harder? Do you think you're up for the challenge? What you can do is that you can paint a black and white painting, but using a colored photo. That's really going to test yourself with values because now you're going to have to practice and be able to translate color into value. So you're going to see a color and be like, all right, like what value is that without the photo telling you? So if you can do that, you are doing really good with your values. Now, if you do that, or if you do become a patron and try the full version of these exercises, make sure to tag me on Instagram at Forza43 and use the hashtag PaintCoach. That's it for this video. I'm Chris Fornatero here telling you to go get painting.